Hello everyone, this is Miss Wills again, and we're just going to continue with Act 5, Scene 1. In the last clip, we kind of finished where I asked you to look at the following motifs and how they're used in Act 5, Scene 1. So that's hands, blood, and sleep. So we're going to start by looking at sleep. And it says here, throughout the scene, Lady Macbeth is in a slumbery agitation, is what it's described as, and the doctor refers to her sleepwalk as a disease. Okay, now what I'd like you to think about and jot ideas down in response to is how does Shakespeare use the motif of sleep here? What does it highlight in this scene? So can you pause this recording, please, and write your ideas down? Okay, so you may have something along the lines of the following down. So normally sleep represents peace and rest, but it seems Lady Macbeth now is so far gone that she cannot find that peace in her life anymore. She cannot find comfort. Her world is so full of darkness now and torment that she can never return to that peaceful life she once had. It's another example of the destruction of the natural order of things as well, of course. It could also represent her descent into madness and how guilty she feels for her part in the murders. So there's a sense that, is she kind of returning to humanity a little bit now? She's starting to feel guilt and she has a conscience as well. So next we have the motif of blood. Now, throughout the scene, Lady Macbeth tries to clean the blood from her hands, much like Macbeth did after he killed the king. She says, "Out, damn spot, out, I say." Now, I want you to write down your ideas again about how Shakespeare uses the motif of blood in this scene and what it highlights. So can you please pause the recording and jot down your ideas? Okay, just some notes here. So the use of blood is mirrored elsewhere in the play several times, but also in Act 3, Scene 4, where Macbeth says, "I'm in blood stepped in so far that, should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as the gore." So basically, Macbeth believes that he's committed too many crimes and he'll never be able to turn his life around again. He'll never find salvation. He's gone too far. And this kind of seems to be echoed in this scene here. Lady Macbeth has gone too far. She cannot get the blood out of her hands. She cannot cleanse herself, her soul. She cannot rid herself of the sin that she's indulged in and the evil. So it's kind of showing us that yes, she feels guilty now, but also there's no turning back for her. She's stained. Her soul's corrupted. And may also highlight how insanity is taking hold of Lady Macbeth. We've seen this with Macbeth already, but it also seems to be happening with Lady Macbeth now. Something she did mock him for previously, which is now starting to happen to her. Okay, finally, hands. So throughout the scene, Lady Macbeth desperately tries to clean her hands. It's an accustomed action with her to seem thus washing her hands, is what the gentlewoman says to the doctor. And Lady Macbeth says all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. So finally, I would like you to pause this recording again and jot down ideas as to what this motif of hands represents in this scene. Okay, so what I've said here is the hands represent Lady Macbeth's guilt, a sense of guilt she mocked Macbeth over in Act 2, Scene 2, but she constantly wants to cleanse herself. So it might be she wants to cleanse her soul of the dark spirits she called upon earlier in the play as well. But we definitely see the sense that she, she is very vulnerable here. And this weakness that she tried to rid herself of, this remorse, this guilt when she called upon the spirits earlier in the play, she now has succumbed to. Okay, so is Shakespeare kind of telling us here, is it a warning essentially that we can't escape these emotions and they will take control? Shakespeare shows it's too late for a character and that she cannot be cleansed of her sins. She has gone too far. Okay then. So when we think about the methods Shakespeare uses in highlighting certain messages and in the kind of meanings and expressing the meanings that he's wanting to get across to an audience, we also need to not only consider the language he uses, but also the structure. So why does he place certain events in certain places in that kind of order in the play. Why has he done that? Why has he included this? So when we look at Act 5, Scene 1, it kind of very much mirrors Act 2, Scene 2, and it reminds us of the motif that we've looked at of blood, hands, and sleep. But it also possibly could mean that in Act 2 he's kind of foreshadowing and building towards this scene here, building towards Lady Macbeth being overwhelmed by her guilt, the guilt that she did mock Macbeth for in Act 2, Scene 2. So yeah, we've got that interesting structure there. So here we've got in Act 2, Scene 2, go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hands. And then we've got the kind of mirror and foreshadowing here of, she's constantly washing her hands, but she cannot get it out. She's trying to clean it and she can't. We have here when we talk about sleep being murdered, Macbeth shall sleep no more. And of course, we have mirroring here where she's struggling, she's in an agitated slumber, but also we have this idea of unnatural deeds do breed unnatural troubles. So this idea of not being able to sleep is definitely an unnatural trouble that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth has faced as a consequence of killing the king. Okay, so a couple of things just to think about then is this scene's important because of what it reveals about Lady Macbeth, of course. She gains humanity as the play goes on here, arguably. We see her at her most vulnerable. She's definitely lost all the sense of control. She's racked with guilt as well. And she's marginalized by her husband. The spirits have abandoned her. They seem to have used her perhaps for what they needed. She's manipulated Macbeth, but there's no use for her now. She's cast aside. Wonder, do you think an audience would feel any sense of sympathy for her at this point? So what is Shakespeare's main message though? Is it a warning that women of the time should not become too ambitious because ambitious women are actually dangerous, so don't overreach yourself, perhaps? Another thing to think about as well is it's seen as not only important because of what it reveals about Lady Macbeth, but also what it tells us about Macbeth. He's not in this scene, but it does reveal a lot. We could see Lady Macbeth as a foil for Macbeth in this scene. He's the important one, not her. She's merely a device to reveal to the audience how depraved Macbeth has become. So he was more human than her at the beginning of the play, but now she's the one who's overwhelmed. So at the beginning of the play, he seemed to be the one that we sympathised with. She seemed to be the one who had no remorse, who was in control and power. But we can see, well, actually, she succumbed to that. But he's done the opposite. As his power has grown, he's lost this sense of humanity gradually to the point where he's killed innocent family as well. If Shakespeare's main message is contained in the character Macbeth, then the scene of Lady Macbeth sleepwalking actually helps us understand it. So blood will have blood. Don't give in to temptation. Don't upset the status quo and remain loyal to the king. The key message is that essentially. You may have ambition, you may be tempted, but don't do it because look what happens. Okay guys, so finally, the final thing I would like you to do for this lesson is to complete the following statements just to summarize your understanding of Lady Macbeth's character and her journey. So thank you very much for listening to this clip, and if you do have any questions, please email your teacher. Thank you.